Hi, welcome to Jurassic Park 3 Minutes, where we'll be discussing the second sequel to Jurassic Park 1 minute at a time. I'm Brad.
I'm Dave.
And on this episode, we'll be talking about minute 13 of Jurassic Park 3. Dave, ready to get into it?
Sure.
Alright. As we entered minute 12 of Jurassic Park 3, the rapid prototyper had finished, and Billy removed it and showed Grant, and then blew through it, and we heard a shrill sound. As we open on minute 13, Grant smiles, remembering the sounds the Raptors made on Isla Nublar. He takes the resonating chamber from Billy and says, "Wow, this is brilliant, Billy. It really is. But it's sad to say it's just a little bit late." At the 12-second mark, we can hear footsteps on gravel outside the tent, and then we hear someone call Dr. Grant's name. And we turn to reveal Paul Kirby, standing in the tent doorway. He introduces himself as Paul Kirby, from Kirby Enterprises, and offers him his card. And then looks past Grant and says, "How you doing, Billy?" The two men leave the tent and walk out into the dig site, and Grant asks Paul, "What can I do for you, Mr. Kirby?" Paul says he's a great admirer of his work, and that he's a business proposition for him, and then asks Grant if he'd like to have dinner with Paul and his wife, and it'd be their treat. Grant says that he's tired and he's been travelling, but then Billy tells Paul that they'd love to, and Grant shoots daggers in Billy's direction. At the 45-second mark, we cut to a pool table, and Randy Newman playing in the background out of a jukebox. And as the minute ends, Grant and Billy find the Kirby's booth at the back of the bar, and it's introductions all around as they sit down. As minute 13 opens, Billy's still blowing away on the resonating chamber there. And the sort of the sound we're getting, you can sort of hear that scratchy, snarling sound, but especially if someone like Grant, who knew what the animals sound like, you're sure you'd be able to start changing the pitch, changing how fast or how hard you're blowing through it, and you'd be able to probably tune it in a bit to get that sound of one of those shrieks, which would be terrifying.
The Field Museum, actually, you brought up last minute, like the Parasaurolophus. The Field Museum actually had or I think it still does, has this thing where you press a pump and it blows air through a replication of the Parasaurolophus's crest there. And if you press down on it harder, the pitch gets higher. If you do it slowly, the pitch gets lower. So, like exactly as you just said.
Yeah. Yep. Well, yeah, and sort of going off what we were saying last thing too, with just scanning skulls and that, you'd think by now, and I'd assume by now, that they've been able to reproduce a lot of sounds that animals could make, especially the horned ones, if they had those bills or those internal nasal cavities that were still sort of intact after fossilization. And that sort of makes me wonder why now, in a Jurassic World era, where we're still combining dolphins and zebras together and all that, you'd think there'd be a lot more sort of knowing or being able to tell a lot more of what the animals actually sound like instead of elephant and dingo and whatever else they did. We especially know later on when Grant gets to the island, he sort of has a go at it himself, and if he wasn't interrupted here by the Kirbys, he probably would have had a go as well and tried to make it sound a bit better, but we'll get to that towards the end of the film.
I mean, at least they did sort of keep continuity. I was remissing, I can't remember whom with, earlier this week, that we just don't hear the dolphin scream anymore. We don't.
Yeah.
We kind of heard a hint back to it. I know I heard some dolphin sounds when Blue was backing up Owen in Fallen Kingdom, but we don't get that loud, high-pitched scream that they used to make in the first two movies.
Yeah, we got it. I think we discussed this when we were doing the Lost World Minute when we got to the Raptors, but in Jurassic World when Omar Sy, Barry? When him and Hoskins are with the Raptors in the cages and they got their heads restrained, and Hoskins is there, and you can hear, I think it's Echo or Delta, do one of those screams at transition.
I forgot about that. Yeah. It's weird because their mouths are strapped down. So that's what we said at the time. The fact that you got that scream in the transition, yet all four Raptors are there, contained and harnessed, and not able to open their mouths. So, but yeah, and that's that thing, and it's sort of, as I've seen discussion the last few days as well, just the difference between
air quotes, wild raptors and what we get in these newer films where, yes, the DNA is probably different. They're recloned. They're not probably the same animals as what we got in the original films, but just how that we don't really see any wild dinosaurs. It's all sort of, even in Fallen Kingdom where they've been on their own for 4 years, you think of how some of the animals presented in Lost World when they were on their own for 4 years, and now in Fallen Kingdom, it's sort of like they're still acting the same way as they did if there was visitors in gyrospheres rolling around between them.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to the minute. Smiling, Grant sort of takes a prototype from Billy and says, "Wow, this is brilliant, Billy. Really, it is. But I'm sad. I'm sad to say it's just a little bit too late." I don't know how this would make him any money. It'd be a good little research, and we know he's sort of studying the vocal side of things of raptors, but it's obviously not enough. He's been around trying to gain money and showing what his research is, and no one's interested. So it's a good little side project, but it's not really going to help in the long run anyway, I don't see, unless they can then take what they've learnt there and apply it to other animals and even other body parts, I suppose, as well, maybe. Because I wonder even if it's something like the eye socket or something. But that's when behind Grant we hear a man's voice calling his name, and Alan turns to reveal a man wearing sunglasses standing in the opening of the tent, and he puts his hand out. "Paul Kirby, Kirby Enterprises," and then offers him his business card.
It's so simplistic in design. You could have had like a stack of 100 of these made up for $20, you know?
We haven't got there yet. I know on eBay, there's people trying to flog off a Kirby Enterprises card.
Yeah.
And I don't, unless the props come up somewhere that I haven't seen, I don't know where people are getting that design from. Because you don't see it here.
You're right, because we never do see it.
So, yeah, I don't know if there's just some behind the scenes or... Yeah.
There might be, because I know there's a couple props out there that we've gotten quote-unquote reproductions from that we just never see. Like, there's, I think, an engine bottle or something with the label on it, and we just never see it in the movie. But there's reproductions of, you can print out the label and slap it on a water bottle if you want it.
Is that the lab? It's got the lab stats on it or something?
Yeah, with the 1994 that evacuation date or 95 or something like that.
Yeah. I think we might discover some of that when we get to the water truck and what Eric's been collecting there. Because I think there's some stuff like that in the background.
Maybe. We'd have to look.
Or it might be just more of that sort of background set filler stuff for the lab that was there and never sort of put on screen. Because I suppose we'll get to it when we get there, but we know how much Spielberg had the operations centre sort of dressed out. I don't know how much they went to work on the lab as well, but I suppose we'll get there when we get there in a few weeks' time. But then he looks around Grant and says, "How you doing, Billy?" Which, this little introduction, does it make you think Billy and Paul have spoken to each other before? Because he sort of knows Dr. Grant and sort of calls Billy by Billy, not Mr. Brennan, or Billy Brennan. It sort of just makes you wonder if those two have had words before.
I know it does, because not only that, but they do seem, not only are they on a first-name basis, but we do seem to hear the way that he talks about them when they're on the plane later. He turns to Cooper and asks, "So how do you know the Kirbys? Like they've been friends for years, you know?"
Yeah, and especially too, like when we get to the script and novel comparisons, yes, he does, and it's never sort of shown here in the film apart from these little hints, and especially when he's the one that's pushing Grant to listen to what they have to say, to take them up on their offer and do all this stuff too, like knowing exactly what the offer's going to be, or at least know that they're rich, or think he knows that they're rich anyway. But we'll get to that in a minute with the novel and script stuff. As Paul and Grant leave the tent, he says, "First thing, I'm a great admirer of yours, and I have a position I'd like to discuss with you. Would you have dinner with my wife and me this evening? It'd be our treat." Which sort of a dig, sort of knows how in the bank or in the hole Grant is, and says, "I'll come have dinner and I'll pay for it," just to entice him there. But Alan replies, "That'd be great, but I'm tired. I've been travelling. Maybe some other time," and just throwing that fake smile there, just trying to find any way he can of getting rid of him. But Paul says, "Believe me, it'll be well worth your while." And behind Paul, Billy comes up after leaving the tent and is walking towards him before Alan can say anything. He answered, "Would love to," which, again, sort of just pushing Grant to be involved here. And
we never get to see it, but I would have loved to have gotten, like, Grant just shooting him a dirty look. Like, come on!
Oh, I reckon we get something that's pretty close. In both the novel and the script here, when sort of Paul's telling him it'll be well worth your while and facing Grant, Billy's actually behind him rubbing his fingers together, doing his loaded symbol with his hands, which they never show in the film, which is a shame. Laura replies, "Terrific," and looks back at Billy, and we get a slow zoom in on Grant's face, and you can just see that he's shooting daggers at Billy. He's not even looking at Paul, he's looking straight at Billy. And again, that sort of frightening look that Sam Neill gives. But before we move on to the bar, William H. Macy, well-known actor, second build in the film behind Sam Neill. We sort of discussed him a little bit when we done minute 0, looking at the trailer and that. I sort of know him from his goofball roles like Wild Hogs, stuff like that. But he's known for a lot more famous stuff, and he was sort of fairly active during the time the film come out, and has been pretty active ever since as well.
I think the first role I ever encountered him in was Air Force One with Harrison Ford.
Get off my plane.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then it was I knew him a lot again in like less serious roles like Fargo and Wild Hogs. Mm-hmm. But what I'm currently know him most for right now is the TV show, the Showtime show Shameless, which is set Irish Chicago family who live in the slums of Chicago. And I mean, you watch him in his role, or you watch him in Fargo, and sure, he's a knucklehead goofball. But then you watch him in Shameless, and this guy, I mean, he is a shyster, like the biggest piece of crap you'd ever know. I mean, he like constantly is using his kids to just scam people, you know? Wow. I mean, you just look at him and you know the character, and you think, all right, what stupid scheme is he up to now? I think the latest one in the latest season was he got a senator to come out of retirement so that he could be his campaign manager, so that he could steal the campaign funds for beer money. Exactly. Wow. And then, of course, it backfires on him, and the guy actually somehow gets elected.
I wonder, that could have made this film a lot darker if he purchased the tickets for Ben and Eric to go parasailing and then called Enrique to say, whatever happens, make sure they get stranded there. All part of an elaborate ruse to get back with his wife.
No, but they could have made this guy the villain, more villainous than he is, because in the final movie, he comes. Both the Kirbys come off as very sympathetic people who you feel sorry for, because they're divorced. The son had and the wife's boyfriend got in a tragic parasailing accident, and they just want their son back, and it's all wishy-washy. No, they could have made this guy like a real piece of work.
Yeah, you know? And it all goes back to sort of the Spielberg influence, where it's in nearly every film he does, where it's always the broken family, the divorce, and the kids and everything else like that. And it's sort of, you'd think here where Joe Johnston's taking over, but because Spielberg's still in that executive producer role and still sort of really calling the shots behind, we see the same thing in Fallen King or Jurassic World as well. where even though Colin's in charge, it's sort of, he's still bringing themes, heavy used themes by Spielberg. Do you think he'd be a good way of getting away from it? Yes, we're going to have this average family and they're going to be sympathetic, but maybe there's a little bit of a darker side here and a good reason why they're broken or split up. But no, it's just because he's a goofball and she totals 3 cars in 3 months, whatever the line is. I suppose just bringing the films back to basics and just having those everyman people again. Yes, you got a couple of mercenaries for the action side of things, even though it doesn't really come across. But just it could be anyone on this island, and this is how what they got to do to survive.
Yeah. But
we're not on the island yet because we cut to a bar and a pool table, and Randy Newman's on the jukebox singing away. Oh, it always I got the soundtrack pretty early on. It always amused me about how we got this Randy Newman song on the end of a score, like a composed score soundtrack. I didn't actually look into the song at all, but I do believe it was sung, like, composed for this film.
Was it?
Yeah.
I thought it was a Randy Newman song they just got the rights for.
Alright, we're, it's still playing next minute. I might Google that before we record next minute, so I might report back on that. But I always thought, obviously referring to Grant's hat.
Mm-hmm.
But
No, it's funny because, I mean, you do say that, and the lyrics do kind of match the scene a bit, because big hat, no cattle, that's the Kirbys. They got all this talk in front of them, but nothing to back it up.
Oh, I always thought it was Grant the cowboy, but he's got no cows. There you go, yeah, good point. That's sort of suggesting more that it definitely was written for the movie. But
yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
We'll have to find out about that. Anyway, they walk into the bar as the music continues to play and come over to the Kirby's booth, and it's introductions all around. And as the minute ends, they go to sit down. But not briefly, looking into the novel side of things and script comparisons, we start to get some interesting extra bits with this script here. As Billy's blowing on the resonating chamber, we actually cut and see a flock of birds outside fly off scared, which is an interesting thing, and maybe a little bit of a callback back to the Lost World novel, where you always hear those cries of birds off in the distance.
Yeah, well, in every Jurassic Park movie, I can't remember, I haven't found it in Fallen Kingdom yet, I'll have to look for it next time I rewatch it, but we get a flock of white birds, either both seen or heard, making these and they're like CGI birds, they're not even real birds. In the first movie, you can see them on the back of the Brachiosaurus's back. In the second movie, we get them twice. We see them when the T-Rex are moving through the forest underneath the high hide, and they fly off, and we can hear the sound of them. Then we just hear the sound of them again later when the male T-Rex is coming into the camp.
Yeah.
And in this movie, you can see them, but don't hear them on the back of the Brachiosaurus. But I think you also see them in the no, you don't see them in the river scene. Oh, but then you do see and hear them again in the final showdown in Jurassic World, where they are where the I-Rex scares him off as he's moving through the forest to the trap that InGen has set for her.
Yeah, well, that's it. When we brought it up when we were discussing that minute in the Lost World with the Tyrannosaurs walking through the forest, just how it's all CG and Foley work there, and obviously someone in the production loves those birds.
It was like kind of a running gag in the Jurassic Park movies, which I've always liked.
I can't recall. Are they sitting in the tree that the Rex knocks over when it comes through to get the Gallimimus as well? I seem to think there's birds in that tree as well, but it might just be the tree sort of flying apart as the Tyrannosaur pushes past it to get the Gallimimus that's tripped over.
I can't remember it. I have to watch it again.
Yeah. Because I also seem to think later on when we get, after they leave the aviary and Grant and that look back up it as the fog clears, that there's birds flying over the top of it there as well. But
yeah, there are.
Yeah. That's alright. We'll get to that when we get there. But I just found interesting that they're sort of fly off scared when they hear that, even though it's just Billy in a tent, not really making a lot of noise, just how much that sound carries. And
well, something I do like, I'm not sure if it actually was there or if they added it later on, is that when in the first movie when Grant is making that Raptor speech to the kid, you can hear in the background a hawk crying. You can hear the hawk make its cry which we know hawks are members of the bird of prey of birds, and he's given the speech about raptors, which means velociraptor, swift or raptors, birds of prey.
Yeah.
You know.
Yep. Yeah, that's interesting that he sort of names that within seconds after hearing that in the background.
Yeah, so that could have been another callback to the first movie.
Also, too, when after Billy sort of takes the Grant takes the resonating chamber off Billy. Billy looks past Grant to see a man and woman getting out of a Cadillac out in the dig site, and Cheryl's pointing them in Grant's direction. So he sort of sees them arrive, and we don't just get Paul arriving at the tent here, but Billy says, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, some visitors wanted to come by and talk to you. I told them you'd be happy to see them, maybe even have dinner with them," which is weird that he's sort of really putting it on now, where he's already organised dinner and invited them out without even telling Grant. Which makes me wonder, like, 2001, okay, he hasn't Googled Kirby Enterprises to sort of know who they are, but...
It wasn't even Google back then, it was Ask Jeeves.
Yeah, well, I think I was on Yahoo. I had my Yahoo mail email by then, but... Yeah, so again, it just sort of adds to that mystery of how much Billy knows the Kirbys and how long he's been talking to them, where they've already asked him if they can come out and visit